So, a pleasant morning to each and everyone. My name is Victoria Jo Flores, and I am the next reporter who's gonna be tackling about the integrative model, the working memory in neuroscience, and the working memory. So, what is working memory? So, the working memory model is probably the most widely used and accepted model today. So, psychologists who use it view short term and long term memory from a different perspective. And also, working memory holds only the most recently activated or conscious portion of long term memory. And it moves these activated elements into and out of brief temporary memory storage, according to Dosher 2003. And yes, so in order for us to understand more what is working memory, here are some examples. So, keeping a person's address in mind while being given directions. Number two, keeping elements or the sequence of a story in mind before the person completes telling it. Number three, dialing a telephone number that you were just told. Number four, calculating the total bill of your groceries as you are shopping. So basically, working memory is like your brain is doing a multitasking. So while you were trying to memorize something, you will you are either doing the verbal and auditory information, like you were saying it in a verbal way, or you are seeing it, and at the same time you were thinking something. So that is a the working memory is a matter of your brain is doing a multitasking. And a metaphor for the working memory model might be a multimedia production house. It continuously generates and manipulates images and sounds. It also coordinates the integration of sights and sounds into meaningful arrangements. So once images, sounds, and other information are stored, they are still available for reformatting and reintegration in novel ways. So as new demands and new information become available. So what does this mean? That once images and sounds and other information are stored, they are still available for reformatting. So once like for example, you already watched a movie and then you want to recommend it with your friends. So in that case, you are using the visual spatial sketchpad and also the visual information for storing the information, and then at the same time you are telling it. You were trying to remember the memory, the long term memory. You're trying to remember the movie, and then at the same time you were telling it in the verbal way. So that is one example of working memory. And now, here are the components of the working memory. So as you can see in the picture, the central executive is on top, and then it has many components like the phonological loop, which is the verbal information, and the auditory as well. And in the right side is the visuospatial sketchpad and the visual information. And on in the center is the episodic buffer, and then the long-term memory. So now I'm going to explain to you the different components of working memory. So the first element is the visuospatial sketchpad. So the visuospatial sketchpad holds some visual images. So basically, when you were trying to watch a movie, you were also using your visual spatial sketchpad and your visual images to remember things. And then the next element is the phonological loop. So the phonological loop briefly holds inner speech for verbal comprehension and for acoustic rehearsal. So so we use phonological loop for a number of everyday tasks, including sounding out new and difficult words, and also solving word problems. And now there are two critical components of this loop. So the first one is the phonological storage. So the phonological storage holds the information in the memory. And the second one is the subvocal rehearsal. So the subvocal rehearsal is used to put the information into the memory in the first place. So the role of subvocal rehearsal can be seen in the following example. And now let's proceed to our next activity. So now, pause for a bit and try this one. So try to memorize the following list of words while repeating the number 5 to yourself continuously. Tree, pencil, marshmallow, lump, sunglasses, computer, chocolate, noise, clock, snow, river, square, store. And then continuously say number 5 to yourself. Okay? Okay. I think we're done. You are done trying this one. So, did you notice how hard it is to memorize these words? Okay, now, try it again without repeating the number 5 to yourself. It should be much easier now. Diba? Masayon siya. Okay. So, in this case, when the subvocal rehearsal is inhibited and you would be unable to rehearse the new words. So, when subvocal rehearsal is inhibited, the new information is not stored. So, kung ato na-inhibit ang subvocal rehearsal, dili na ta makakuan, dili na ta maka-speak, dili na ta maka-memorize ani. Kay nga naman, we are very vocal. Atong gi-vocal number 5, 5, 5. Then, unsaon man nato pag-memorize ang trig pencil kung kasigi lang tag 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. So, mo na siya ang subvocal rehearsal. Then, unsa may tawag ana nga phenomenon nga dili na to kaya ma-memorize kung lahi atong i-vocal. So, here it is. So, this phenomenon is called articulatory suppression. So, what is articulatory suppression? So, articulatory suppression is more pronounced when the information is presented visually versus orally. So, the amount of information that can be manipulated within the phonological loop is limited. So, thus, we can remember fewer long words compared with short words. So, without this loop, acoustic information decays after about 2 seconds. And next slide. And the third element is the central executive. So as you can see in the model that I showed to you earlier, you can see that the central executive is on the top part. So why is it that the central executive is very important? So which both essential executive which both coordinates attentional activities and governs responses. So the central executive is critical to working memory. Nga naman, because it is the gating mechanism that decides what information to process further and how to process this information. So si central executive is very important gid siya kay siya ang mag-decide kung unsa nga resources ang iyahang i-allocate sa memory, and also involved siya sa higher order of reasoning and comprehension, and is the central to human intelligence. So basically, siya ang naghandle sa tanan kung unsa ang at dapat na to angay nga ma-memorize, ma-store na to sa tong long-term memory. So si central executive murag siya ang CPU sa atong lawas. So probably that's the reason why nanganong naa siya sa babaw. And then the fourth element is the number of other subsidiary slave system that perform other cognitive perceptual tasks. So also known as the episodic buffer. So the episodic buffer is limited capacity system that is capable of binding the information from the visual spatial sketchpad and the phonological loop as well. So from the word buffer, siya ang tig-combine if ang nasa long-term memory into a unitary episodic representation. So this component integrates information from different parts of working memory. So visual, spatial, and phonological, so that they can make sense to us. So this incorporation allows us to solve the problems and reevaluate previous experiences with more recent knowledge. So basically, ang giingon dire, if isagol na to ang atuang phonological loop or the verbal and auditory information o ang atuang visual, mas magamit na to siya to our daily life, mas knowledgeable ta paminawon, and then yes, mao na siya ang mga bright dali kay sila maka-memorize when reading because nag-kuan jud ang ilahang utok, nag-reunite ang duha ka component. And then the fifth that's what I'm trying to say, the episodic buffer. So the episodic buffer is a limited capacity system. So that is what I'm saying earlier. So the examples are integrating acoustic and the examples of acoustic and visual information is through cross modality, organizing information into meaningful chunks and linking new information to existing forms of knowledge representation in the long-term memory. So, let's move forward to the neuroscience and working memory. So, kay nagisgot naman ta diri neuroscience. So, what is neuroscience? So, neuroscience is an interdisciplinary science that works closely with other disciplines such as mathematics, linguistics, engineering, computer science, chemistry, philosophy, psychology, and medicine. So, neuropsychological methods and especially brain imaging can be very helpful in understanding the nature of memory. It is a support for a distinction between working memory and a long-term memory comes from a neuropsychological research. So, kung hisgot kitag neuroscience, it is about our brain. So when we are going to use neuropsychological methods is like atong example ana kay kanang mga imaging, neuroimaging, the PET. So kung yun na siyang i-research, mo na siya ang isa sa mga naghatag sa naghatag og kanang, it is a position emission to tomography. The investigators have found evidence for distinct brain areas involved in the different aspects of a working memory. So, through that, nakaingon sila nga the phonological loop maintaining speech-related information. And it appears that the involved activation in the left hemisphere of the lateral frontal inferior parietal lobe, so as well as the temporal lobe. So, diha nila naibawan kung asa dapit sa atong utok mas mo-function ang phonological loop. So, ang giingon diri, so later on nakita na nato. So, I have pictures for where we can locate the different components. And yes, now let's move forward to now let's locate where we can find different components in the brain. Yes, the figure 5.6, the brain and the working memory. So, as you can see there, there's the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere. So, these are the areas involved in verbal working memory and the phonological storage and sub-vocal rehearsal. So, it is interesting that the visual spatial sketchpad activate two slightly different areas. So, kung imong i-compare si phonological, si visual spatial kay bisag asa ra siya sa brain nimo mo appear. But shorter intervals activate areas of the occipital and right frontal lobes, and the longer intervals activate areas of the parietal and left frontal lobes. Next slide. So this is the areas that is involved in phonological storage. So gibalik ra. And the phonological loop maintaining speech, written information appears to involve activation in the left hemisphere. And the area involved in the subvocal, so the area that we call the subvocal rehearsal is the Broca's area. So diha mao ni ang nakita sa mga neuropsychologist sa ilahang gistadihan nga unsa jud ang working memory, unsay dagan niya sa atong utok. So the different aspects of working memory are represented in the brain differently. So basically mauna ang reason nga nung importante nga kita makaibaw gid ta, importante nga tanan nga information nga atong ipangsulti kay masuportaan gid siya og mga images or what we call mga neuropsychological methods, because it will prove that what were the scientists saying is true. So, executive functions are located primarily in the prefrontal regions of the frontal lobe. So, si executive DI, kay malocate na to siya sa parts sa tong brain sa may frontal lobe. It has with multiple neuronal connections to the other cortical, subcortical, and brainstem regions. So, yeah, basically daghan gid siya connections because siya manggod ang mupasa sa mga storage kung unsay angay natong hinumduman. So yeah, it's very important to eat healthy foods. Yeah, ato sang suportahan na sa atong brain para mas makatarong siya og function and mas makatabang sa atoa. The main problem jud nga atong gikatubang karon is ang mga teenagers dili na makakuha og enough sleep. So mo na ang mga teenagers usahay, not all ha, pero usahay maglisod na sila og remember things because that is wala man nila gisuportahan ang ilahang central executive. So yes, the additional information. So the buffer is used for remembering information temporarily. So, temporary na ay na siya episodic buffer. So, it is distinct from long-term memory, which is remembering information for long periods. And yes, sa akong gisulti ninyo ganina, ang PET, maugin na siya nagkuan og evidence nga naglihok ato ang memory in the different parts of our brain. And also, the episodic buffer seem to be involved in the bilateral activation of frontal lobes and portions of the temporal lobes. And yes, thank you so much for having time to listen. Yeah, do you have any questions for me before we go? I think wala na. So that's it. Thank you so much.